Hi, I've got this engine out of my friend's jet boat. It's a supercharged Big Block Chevy. We're going to be rebuilding it. So I've had the bores honed, new cam bearings fitted, and the cylinder head surface is decked. So I'm just about ready to start cleaning it. So I've removed oil gallery plugs from various locations so that I can get a brush through to clean them out. So once it's clean, then I'll get on to the crankshaft. Just finished scraping down a lot of the paint off the block, and I'm trying to get these last 3 oil gallery plugs out, and they won't come out. So I'm about to hit them with a bit of heat. See if I can loosen them up. Wasn't successful getting the plugs out of the oil gallery by heat, so I've had to drill them out and use an easy out. Actually they came out really well. No damage to the threads inside the block. So 3 new plugs will fix it. I've just washed the block down. I've put a mixture of truck wash and floor detergent to clean the bores, rub the bores out really clean. And once you've washed them, you've got to get the inox onto them straight away and blow the water out. Otherwise you start getting a rust finish, so you have to do that really quickly. We ended up with a nice clean engine ready for the next step. When I'm washing out the block, I always like to run a brush through the oil galleries. So I've got a brush like this, and also you've got to figure out where the oil galleries go. So on this particular engine, the oil pump mounts off the rear main cap, feeds down through this hole here, goes across into the filter, and then from the filter it goes back into this hole, back across to the center of the rear main. It also goes up to the 2 lifter galleries which run full length of the engine. Then it feeds across on an angle. You can see a little bit of a casting here where it feeds across. Then it comes across and the rail runs full length of the engine. That's why I had to get these plugs out that wouldn't come out, because I wanted to run the brush down through there to clean out the oil feed holes to each main cap. So it's all nice and clean now, ready to start measuring up the bearings. Make sure you get all of these oil gallery plugs in. Sometimes it's very inconvenient if you forget later on. Double check. Lifted the engine off the stand, used this socket to hit the camshaft wash plug back in. A little bit of seal around the edge to make sure it doesn't leak oil. Okay, it's time to put some bearings in. Got these King racing bearings that seem to be quite good at the moment. So I'll whack those in and measure them up. Okay, we've got a couple of bearings. The bearing with the groove goes on the block side. The smooth side goes on the cap side. The narrow ones are the normal bearing. These ones with the flange is the end thrust bearing, which goes at the back in this engine. See, there's a tag on the corner there that lines up with the tag in the block to help locate it. So put that in, line that up there, push this side down. A little bit of oil on each bearing, ready to drop the crank in. Notice that I haven't put the rear seal in yet. That's because I want to measure it first before I put the seal in. Okay, we got a forged GM crankshaft. We just had it rebalanced to suit the new con rods we're putting in. You can see it's a cross drilled unit, and you can tell by the surface finish that it's a forged crank. It hasn't got many markings on it. There's a little GM badge there and a couple of numbers up there. Just finished cleaning it all up, blowing all the holes out, trying to make sure it's really clean, ready to drop it in. I've had everything measured up at the machine shop, but I always like to just double check with a bit of flexi gauge just to make sure something isn't way off. So you can see the bit of flexi gauge there. Looks like about 2.5 thou, so that's pretty close to what we're aiming for, so that's all good. Keep going. Okay, I've just pulled the crankshaft back out so that I can fit the rear seal. This is a Felpro rear seal, and it comes with this small tool here so that I can press the seal in without damaging the back of it on the sharp edge as it goes in. So that'll be good for the block and the cap as well. I put a tiny bit of grease on the lip of the rear seal because if it's actually working, it doesn't get any lubrication when it's running, so that little bit of grease will keep it lubricated. Also put sealer from there to there so that the cap doesn't leak where it joins. You don't want oil to leak out between. So just a tiny smear of I think 515 master gas is what I used on there. Okay, tighten the bolts down to locate the cap and then loosen them off again, and then take them down to about 10 foot-pounds so that they can still move a little bit. Then we need to align the cap because it has the end thrust bearings on it. So just going to hit the crank forward, then hit it back. And hit it forward again. The sides of the crankshaft will push on the end thrust bearing and align it for you. So now it's ready to tighten down. Okay, tension on these 110 foot-pounds. They're all good. Now, got to check for a little bit of end float there. Yep, that's moving just a couple of thou, which is exactly what it's meant to do. Okay, got the main caps on, tension them all up, and put a white paint mark on top of each bolt after it's tensioned so that you know it's done. Also, you can see the numbers on the caps. 1, 2, 3, 4. Rear one doesn't need a number because it's different, obviously. Okay. On rods that were in this engine were good rods. The Chevy dot rods. They've been polished. They've got good bolts in them. But we decided to give it an upgrade just to make sure. And we've got these scout units. Going to whack those in. Just got to make sure you get them the right way round because the bottom's offset where the bearing sits is offset on the crankshaft, so you got to make sure you get them the right way. Okay, just double checking to make sure that the conrod's on the right way. You can see the offset on the end of the conrod that moves the bearing closer to one side. That's to miss the radius on the side of the big end journal on the crankshaft. So you can see there that I've got the wider part of the conrod on the side of the radius to give clearance on the bearing. Okay, now I'm doing the piston ring end gaps. Pretty important on a engine like this because that's a failure point. If the end of the rings touch and the rings grabbing the bore, it destroys itself pretty quick. So get that in there, get it square to the surface of the block, same depth all the way around. Then get a feeler gauge and test the gap. I think I've got that one pretty well spot on. Going with 26 thou for the second ring and 30 thou for the top ring. which seems a bit big, but because it's supercharged 15 psi and probably looking at maybe upgrading that down the track, we've got to make sure that we've got enough clearance, otherwise it'll fail. I've finished gapping every ring in its individual bore and transferred it to the respective piston, and just about ready to get the ring compressor out and put some pistons in. They look pretty nice sitting there, don't they? Okay, this is the camshaft, comp cams, 310 BS-14, 270 and 280 at 50 thou, 114 degrees lobe separation, so it's ideal for the blower with the large lobe separation. Put it in now because you've got more room when you put the camshaft in. I've got it lubed up, ready to roll. But to support the far end, I can get my hand in down here through the crankshaft. If I've got the conrods there, can't get in. Another good tip is to screw a bolt into the end. Enables you to hold it easier. It's just a 5/16 UNC bolt. Number 1 piston ready to go. Got the ring compressor sitting on there. You can see the marks on the top here. That's where I've lined my rings up. That's the front of the piston. Put one ring gap there, one ring gap there, one of the oil ring gaps there. Try and opposite align so that they don't all line up and let the oil past. And you've got this tight. Make sure you tap that down, otherwise the ring can pop out between there and the block. Hold it down nice and tight. That's it, number 1's in. Got this nice chart that came with the conrods showing the size of the bolt and the tension. We got 7/16 by 1.6 8740 cap screws, so it'd be 63 foot-pounds. Got the lube, ARP assembly lube, and there's the bolt head there. You can see 8740 ARP. So put that on next. Again, I'm just doing a quick check with the flexi gauge. I know it's already been measured, but I just get a bit of peace of mind if I double check. So, yep, looks pretty well spot on. It's good. Now I can clean that off, oil it up, and tension it up. Just doing the cam timing. It's a bit easier with one piston in because there's less drag when you turn it. Using the inlet lobe centerline method. That's what Comp Cams recommends. So we're aiming for a target of 114 degrees. So I've got this set up. We back it off. And we bring it up till we get 30 thou, because they say 50 thou at the valve, and we've got a 1.7 ratio rocker. So if we go straight off the lifter, that brings us back to approximately 30 thou. Okay, so that's 80. Go past the peak. Back to 30, and we've got 90, 100, 110, 120, 130, 140, 148. So if you add those two together, that's 228, and halve them brings us back to 114. And the spec sheet says 114 intake centerline, so that's what we need to set it up by. So pretty happy that's spot on. Finally reached a bit of a milestone. 8 bald eagles. all in. I think I've been listening to Cletus too much. There, white marks on all the bolts, double checked, marked with white paint so that I know they've been tensioned, and then triple check them again. Last thing you want coming loose, a conrod bolt.